want to reconsider your social media activities because of what we are going to say. And I approached her with this idea that turned into this talk, and I'm very happy that she collaborated and really inspired this work. So she's not here, but I should acknowledge her part in this. I have to try to hit that button.
Yes, just for everybody to know, we are recording the talk part of this presentation.
Yeah, I was supposed to. Still okay? Yeah, still okay. Yes, I have to acknowledge that. And so I'm going back to this sort of observation that we have apparently an AI spring after a long winter. And the spring is even going on despite we have winter now. But of course, there has been lots of progress in social robotics, in gaming, you know, AlphaGo and so on, but also large language models, which have been debated recently very extensively, also maybe as extensions of our cognition and so on. And this spring has sort of been enabled by a significant increase in computing power. Of course, these machine learning, deep learning architectures, and an ever-increasing amount of available training data because of also partly the online activities of worldwide users, which provide a training ground for all these applications. And debates have been going on, and of course, there's lots of interesting questions that this technology and then progress raises, ethical questions, theoretical questions. For example, people are worried about copyrights and understanding or consciousness in large language models. They are debating worries about responsibility in autonomous cars. Last night, my taxi was the first time I used a Tesla car, so I'm not sure what Elon Musk is doing, but we're still not there. So these are kind of futuristic, you know, really autonomous cars are not really here yet, but worries abound. There are also worries about social robots, whether they simulate empathy, whether they can have genuine empathy or emotions or can feel pain. And then, of course, there are ethical questions. Should we build machines that can feel pain and so on? There are worries about bots in connection with fake news, misinformation on social media. You all know the news about certain political campaigns in that context. And there are worries about AI, doomsday scenarios, and human extinction. You know, one day people will become extinct by AI because they don't need us anymore, because they have different values or so. So these are all interesting playgrounds, but we want to sort of pay attention or focus attention on a kind of worries that should present us now already and for a while now already, and not as futuristic as autonomous cars and conscious large language models, but that have to do with our social media activities, and that raises worries about our privacy and about access to our minds, really, that is sort of employed or exploited by big media or big tech companies. So to start with the main thesis of this talk, the practice of collecting and analyzing personal data from users of online services and platforms to predict and manipulate their behavior on behalf of the service providers are genuine forms of mind reading and mind shaping. So in order to make good with that claim and to flesh out some of these keywords in the thesis, I will first start by reminding you a little bit about the debate about mind reading in psychology and philosophy. We'll focus then on the theory and a very specific approach developed by Alison Gopnik and Henry Wellman that relies on machine learning or Bayesian learning insights from computer science to support a claim about cognitive development in children, really, in terms of mind reading. I will then introduce some basics about predictive analytics, predictive analytics is really that I think that's what I've heard is the term that economists and so on use for machine learning. So I think it's pretty much synonymous, or at least predictive analytics is a tool that is grounded in machine learning. But I think for our purposes today, we can use them synonymously. And I will illustrate this with some examples from what we call deep mind reading, and then you can have a discussion. So that's the root. So some Harry Potter fans maybe here. There's one book in this volume, The Order of the Phoenix, where Harry Potter is called to Dumbledore, and he has to learn from Professor Snape the magical art of occlumency, the technique, the capacity to shield one's own mind from the magical access and manipulation from the outside. And so Harry's devious opponent, Lord Voldemort, he's an expert in legilimency. Legilimency? Yeah. That is, of course, something like mind reading. But of course, only muggles talk of mind reading because you can't just open the head and read in the mind like a book or something like that. That's sort of the scene. And then Potter must shield his mind from the dangerous access that Lord Voldemort has. And in a way, we should end by saying we have to sort of engage in some kind of occlumency and reserve our privacy for personal data and don't give it away too easily in this regard. So, so what about this mind reading? Of course, mind reading belongs to the debate about social cognition, which is a broader field, social understanding, and there's a proliferation of theories about how we make sense of other people, how we understand each other, how we know about or get access to other people's mental states. There are only some of the theories here. The the simulation theory, there's some people who focus more on empathy, which involves conscious experience more than the other theories, like theory and simulation and modularity theories. They make claims about how the cognitive architecture is organized in our brains. Do we have innate modules, or do we rely on a theory? Do we simulate other people by relying on our own experience and so on? And of course, some people like Sean Gallagher and other inactivists, they claim we understand each other by interacting, and sort of we don't really understand each other alone using only our brain, but the interaction is doing lots of the work here. I don't want to dwell into the debate here about what's the best theory or so. I take it that the debate has sort of be directed into a kind of pluralism. I think we may have various strategies at our disposal. Sometimes if we are close to the person or we are very similar, we can maybe simulate and think what we might think, what we might do, and so on, and then just hypothesize that the other might think in the same way. But the theory, although it has been criticized a lot, is still very much one strategy, because it has been developed within a framework that is also a nice broader framework about how to think about the brain or brain activity in terms of cognition, like the Bayesian brain or predictive processing, in which it fits quite nicely. So it's at least still a popular theory. And that's where I'm going to focus on. And I should say, of course, social cognition involves more than just mind reading. Mind reading may be the epistemic function of folk psychology, the way we use mental state types like beliefs and desires and so on, to predict and explain others' behavior via the attribution of mental states. So we make sense of why you have come here, because you have a belief that this lecture takes place, and you have the desire to attend the lecture. So we're all here. So we could have predicted that you come here if we had known these two beliefs and desires. Mind shaping is sort of the opposite direction of fit. It's a kind of a practical function of folk psychology when we want to shape each other into agents who can coordinate successfully by making their mind match a model. So politicians, of course, they use their rhetoric to make you believe them and trust them and vote for them and so on. But also advertisers and so on, they try to mind shape you buy their products and all kinds of things. So this is a very general everyday phenomena or practices that we engage in. And empathy, I take that a bit different from both of these, because in most theories of empathy, it's about an experiential grasp where consciousness is involved of the mentality of another agent, including some kind of caring condition. So if you feel empathy, you also care about other people's pain or something like that. That need not be the case in the other cases. So neither is there a claim about a strong link between mind reading and conscious experience, nor caring. You know, you can be a good mind reader and a psychopath or sociopath and not care at all. So I don't want to say anything about empathy in this talk. And I have not much to say about mind shaping for reasons of time, but it will come up in the end, and I will focus on mind reading. So according to the orthodox view, if you rely here on Shannon Spalding's characterization, successful social interaction often involves understanding what others are thinking, what they are trying to achieve. So try to make sense of their behavior. We predict in the end what they are likely to do next. And that's, of course, a good thing to know if you can predict what other people may do in order to, you know, anticipate certain actions, but in also order to prepare yourself to engage in certain actions or make decisions appropriately for the situations. So understanding another's behavior is here achieved by generating mentalistic explanations and predictions. And I'm going to focus on the prediction element here, because that will feature prominently in the kind of deep mind reading that I'm interested in here today. And the theory is then one instance or one proposal how this works. And according to this view, we gather information, employ rich bodies of information about folk psychology, and draw inferences about the unobserved causes of the behavior. So we are confronted with some kind of behavior, and then we, just like a scientist, we posit certain abstract entities, a belief, a desire, an intention, and so on, to make sense of that behavior and to make predictions then about what the agent is likely to do in the future. This rich body of information also contains like sort of psychological laws or platitudes, you know, in situations X, Y, Z, people typically do that and so on, or feel this. That can be generalizations not of a strict law form, but they can help us to apply them to an individual case, for example, when we observe a certain situation. So Alison Gopnik and Henry Wellman, they have really stressed that analogy to science or scientific theories pretty to its limits. So when they say children are little scientists, they explore, they make hypotheses about behavior, and they really take a detached stance towards others, just like an astronomist looks at the stars, you know, and investigates them and posits certain powers or forces and so on, entities, to explain the behavior from a third-person observational perspective. And the mental states are then the theoretical posits or entities, just analogously to quarks and strings and electrons and so on, that the scientist posits. And in order to make sense of cognitive development in children, they allude to theory change. Much of the variety that Thomas Kuhn proposed, with like revolutionary steps where new observed data can't be incorporated in the old kind of theory, and then you sort of have to update the theory. And for a long time, they sort of had this little gap in the theory because they couldn't illuminate how that theory change really takes place in the child. You know, we know a little bit about how it takes place in science, but not so much in children. So you have these claims that there's like major steps or even Copernican revolutions taking place around the 4th birthday, when children understand that people can act on false beliefs and they don't really act on how the world is like, but how they represent the world. You know, that representational nature is then a new feature, and it can only be accommodated, this kind of observations, by changing the theory, much like the Copernican worldview has changed. So there's all this big debate about false beliefs tests and so on. Not interesting for us today. Just want to highlight this kind of element of the theory. And then later on in her work, and in joint work also, they apply insights from machine learning to illuminate the theory change and the kind of model updating in children's cognitive development. So as she writes here, philosophers of science and computer scientists have developed new ideas about how learning and imagination are possible, ideas that have actually been used to design computers that can learn and imagine, the ones that we have now, of course. These ideas can also explain how children learn and imagine as much as they do. I'll show that babies, like scientists, use statistics and experiments to learn about the world. And there's a whole body of research then since the late 90s that engage in showing how little infants, as young as 8 months or so, can make sense of statistical regularities and use them in their reasoning. And it has been, a lot of research has been coming from the vicinity of Gopnik's lab, but also from other people, Laura Schulz and Jenny Safran and other people. And I'm going to sort of illustrate this a little bit, how this is going to work, and bring some examples for this claim that children really use these statistics, which can then sort of be illuminated using kind of Bayesian learning mechanisms that are used and are the grounds also for machine learning architectures, right? So very early research came from Jenny Safran on word learning in the late 90s. So she was wondering how babies learn words when, for example, when they are confronted with data like pretty baby, and the mother says pretty baby, but it sounds like one word, right? How do they recognize where the word limits are? Why do they learn that there are two words, pretty baby, and not pre-tiba be or something like that? And of course, then she had the hypothesis, of course, that given the data that they are confronted with, there's a much higher probability, given that they also hear darling baby or angel baby or something like that, that baby is a word, and that there's a much higher probability that after you hear bay, you will hear be, and there's a much lower probability that T is followed by ba or bay to form the word to bay, right? You don't hear that very often. So given just the statistical plausibility or probability of this co-occurrence, she recognizes, of course, that this is sort of a plausible hypothesis, and then she gave the babies gaga words like daba, baba, and gaga, and then sort of confronted them with them in different proportions and so on, and found that, of course, that's how they do the trick, that they make probabilities or hypotheses about the statistical regularity, how often you hear that together, and so on. So this is one area. There are different areas for image recognition. There's also work here by Fei Xu, who showed little babies, I don't know, 8-month-old, right? 8-month-olds, like boxes with balls in there, and some boxes contained many more red balls than white balls, and some boxes contained the other way around, many more white balls than red balls. And the baby was shown the box transparently at the beginning. That is picture number 2, and then she sort of mixes the box a little bit, closes it, and then reaches in and picks up balls. And there are different conditions. So of course here in 4, 6, and 8, she pulls out red balls, only red balls from the box. That the majority contains also red balls. So the baby is not really surprised if you pick out many more red balls than white balls. But if the other event happened, they looked much longer than the experimenter. So how can it be so implausible, accidental, that you pick out 5 white balls out of a box that is sort of almost only containing red balls, right? So the probability is much lower, and they are much more surprised when this happens. So I hope I made that clear enough. So they say that we generalize from samples to populations and vice versa. You can also go the other way, that how likely is it that you will pick up such a ball, or from a sample of 5, what do you think what the proportion is that the box will contain? Oh, yeah, but might be much more or many more red balls in there and so on. And then they of course also conclude that their babies are intuitive statisticians. You know, infants possess a powerful mechanism for inductive learning, either using heuristics or basic principles of probability. And Gopnik generalizes this sort of into a framework which relies also on Judea Pearl's work about causal maps or Bayes nets, where the claim is that babies construct not only maps of the physical world, but also of the psychological world to understand causes and effects, and can detect and make use of the statistical patterns or regularities that abound in a certain domain. Okay, so since Bayes' theorem specifies in which way we should adjust our beliefs in light of new evidence, this could be how children's early functioning learning mechanism works. So the Bayesian formula gives you a precise measure how to update your belief about something in the light of new incoming evidence. You know, there's a likelihood and a plausibility or probability of that event occurring and so on, and that if you do the math correctly, you're sure to update your belief. So what that suggests as a picture of how mind reading works according to the theory. So if you may have certain beliefs about George, for example, and you may rely on a certain number of platitudes or psychological generalizations, which we can call a rich body of information, right? And use your inference mechanism in the brain, broadly functioning in a Bayesian way, to make predictions, and if you want, take appropriate action and predict maybe, okay, so George is going to have an espresso or something like that. So simulation theorists always criticize that this is too information rich, this is too complicated and so on. So the simulation theory is much better and paints a totally different picture, because you can use your own experience and then don't have to rely on all these laws and psychological platitudes and so on. You can just, you know, consider what we would do, you know, and then apply that. But there's so many problems with the simulation theory. So first of all, how do you get it out of your own mind and apply certain true beliefs to the other person if you just simulate in your head? And another question is also whether that simulation theory is really information poor rather than information rich, because you rely on your own experience, which is a wealth of information that you have gained it in a different way, or maybe it involves much more conscious experience, maybe about painful events and so on, but it's not really clear that it's less information rich. So just as an aside, this is kind of a broad picture that could accommodate, as also other philosophers have recently claimed, accommodate several theories or approaches in one big broad picture that go along with like certain keywords like the Bayesian brain or predictive processing or predictive coding or free energy frameworks in cognitive science as overarching unifying frameworks that explain various aspects of cognition. I'm not defending this here but it has been applied as a loose story on a high level in a way that can accommodate various competing approaches in a sense. So in that sense, this is the part on the theory, and I'm going to move on to exactly halfway, I think, time-wise, to predictive analytics. And here I'm relying on recent literature that I read, which is not so recent. So of course, if you enter a field and you're surprised how old it is. I mean, there's this book here by Eric Siegel from 10 years ago, which gives you the basics about how this is applied by companies and so on. So just give you the rough introduction to this. It's a technology grounded in statistics and computer science, allowing computers to learn from available data. how to make predictions about the future behavior or the mindsets of human individuals. So it detects patterns in data. So of course, data as such is useless, but if you can analyze it in a way using a certain predictive model and can detect or identify patterns, then these patterns can be very helpful and valuable. And this is what happens using this machine learning architecture. It detects patterns in data, which then enable or guide appropriate actions that can be taken in any domain of interest and sort of to profile individuals, right? And it's not a, so there's recent discussions about whether technology is neutral, you know, or whether technology is biased. Is it sort of to be criticized once and for all, or has it useful applications that have to be served? And then is it neutral in the sense that it can be applied in a negative and in a positive way? You could also, I mean, this is a little graph from the book. Of course, it can, you know, in sort of economics, it can use to advertise, it can use to recommend or discount. It can, in universities or education institutions, can be used to assist or educate better if you have good data about how people learn or what problems people have. Criminal justice system, you know, can be used to investigate or incarcerate or to profile. Also, many kinds of forms there. In medicine, it can be used to diagnose and treat. Of course, that's maybe the most positive sort of application. Also, if you take recent advances in image recognition, deep learning algorithm can detect a cancer cell or so in a graph much better than a human eye. So it could be put to use with much more security and much earlier maybe, and then measures can be taken. So there are real world applications of this stuff. But of course, in finance also, it can be used to decide whether you give a loan or give advice to certain people. The talk today is more about the negative sides about this, but I want to acknowledge that it's not really neutral, I think, but there's also, of course, positive applications that should be taken into account when you judge this. So the rough and ready model, how this works is, of course, you start with data. And predictive analytics can only be done by people, companies that have access to the kind of data that are necessary, because it's a huge amount of data that is necessary that to make these kinds of predictions. And of course, then it's like up to the big tech companies to either collect it or then sell these kind of data bodies. And that's what happens, of course. If you look at the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where Facebook sold, people sold their information for $1, I think, and then Facebook made a lot of money, and Cambridge Analytica then sort of used that to manipulate, apparently, I think provenly also, the Brexit campaign, for example, but maybe also other harms have been done or are being done right now, who knows. So data is the starting point, and you have your, so you use, for example, any kind of user data about X, about a certain person. The goal may be to make predictions about a certain individual. And that's why we call it mind reading, because it's not about groups. It's not about like, okay, the British people will decide this and that. No, this is used to make predictions about Paavo or P and so on, and what they are going to do tomorrow. Maybe they buy some sneakers, or they're going to read another book and that they just saw online in advertising, and so on. And I have recent personal examples where this just happened. You know, it's just like really strange when you maybe look at your social media feed. You have been looking on Google for a certain keyword, and then of course the next day you open Facebook and you get an ad for that, right? How do they know? So of course, because they record everything you type and so on. So data is the big source, the new oil. But typically it's provided voluntarily because you want to be engaging in social media and social relations and so on. You want to make friends and so on. So users provide photos on Flickr and personal data, birthplace and birth date and so on Facebook and so on. And that can be fed into this predictive analytics model to make predictions. And sort of, as I already said, of course, it works by detecting certain patterns, co-occurrences, correlations, and so on. People who bought that also bought that. You know that from Amazon, you buy one book and then you get 10 recommendations, and people who bought that, you know, and totally unrelated stuff. But anyway, and it sort of matches the information about X against data from millions of other users. And of course, Facebook is so important because it has maybe the biggest database of users, because I think 2 billion users now. And if you think about how much data is generated every day, I had a number on the first slide, I think 2.5 quintillion, one with 18 zeros, data per day is gathered. Sort of, I don't know from when this estimation is. This book was written in 2013, so maybe it's an old number. So it's just ridiculous. And then, of course, you can make predictions based on that, on these correlations and so on, and this matching. X will probably shop or consume, earn or vote, watch or listen, work or quit, steal or kill, love or divorce, and so on, given what you're interested in, right? So depending on the domain. Showing criminal justice, you want to see, is this person X likely to kill someone, or do suicide, or vote for Trump or whatever. And of course, it happened recently because so Spotify gives you, maybe who's on Spotify in the fall, just before Christmas, there was this like end of the year summary of your Spotify profile. What was your favorite band? You listened to this singer most of the time, and so on. And of course, the band The Smile, which is an offshoot of Radiohead, was ranking very high in my list, and I am listening to them quite frequently. And of course, on Facebook, then there was this ad, oh, they are touring in Germany next summer. Why don't you get tickets? And of course, I bought the ticket. so that worked well. And so then I was recommended Radiohead sweaters, and T-shirts and other promotional merchandising material. And of course, I bought that too. And so it worked, right? So they sort of gather the information. And for us, maybe the spooky thing is that the apps are related. They gather your link history, right? It's not only that you gather the data within your app, within Facebook, but they have sort of access to what you do on Google. Academia, someone searched for you on Google, every day, like 10 times or so. Anyway, so this happens to us. And of course, appropriate actions are taken. Of course, in the economic world, it's about placing personalized advertising to give you the right kind of links to websites that they want you to visit, or to remain longer in a certain medium or a certain app. They recommend new content, of course. If you go on YouTube, it's not a neutral big start site, but it's tailored to you, to what you've been doing on the internet, right? So if I had been buying, so I've visited the Ricky Gervais tour in Lisbon last October. So of course, there's always all clips of Ricky Gervais, stand-up comedy snippets and so on, interviews with Letterman. They're always on my YouTube site because it's like, that's where I went, right? And I watched it on Netflix, and so it's all over Ricky Gervais. Anyway, you can't escape that. You can't get a neutral starting side of that, right? They're always tailored to you. So that's in basic broad strokes how it works. So notice the difference with stereotypes. So we can use, of course, rather than simulate people, so we can use stereotypes. Or he's from Bavaria, or he's from Finland, or she's a banker, or whatever, or philosopher, worse, And then, so you can make certain predictions by categorizing people and so on, but it's not like really that you get into their individual mindset very deeply, because you just can make maybe coarse-grained predictions about what they were going to be likely to do. Maybe, okay, they're academics, they give talks, they read books, they write papers or whatever, or an author. But here, the thing is that you can sort of really make predictions about individuals, about what they think, what they would desire, what they would prefer, and so on. And it's not only behaviors, but it's really the mindsets behind the behaviors that are predicted, right? And then used in order to take action. I mean, and that's where the mind shaping takes place, right? Because then you gather the information about X, you sort of can make predictions, but the appropriate actions are also a kind of mind shaping, because you want to focus them and direct them in the certain direction, to think about that, to take, you know, if they bombard you with Trump information, I don't know, want you to make you vote for them, in the case of the US, for example, and you know, place fake news that are positive for Trump and so on, and place them into your news feed. That's sort of mind shaping taking place at the edge of predictions and actions, or it's part of the actions that are taken. And for example, so to get this a bit more detailed, and how why it's called mind reading, not behavior reading. So predictive analytics can predict unknown personal data about a person X, their gender, ethnicity, preferences, vulnerabilities, maybe risk factors. You know, is there anything medical risk factors, for example, a financial situation or credibility? Also on the basis of analyzing the big data about others. So you may start with, it's about Alice right now. So you have auxiliary data on Alice from her Facebook likes, for example, and shares and information that she shared. You input that into the predictive model and compare it to others, and you get the output that you could, you can make probable or like predictions with a high probability about her sexual identity, for example. And that works by sort of using all the data of all users from the social media platform that are gathered, and you have a subset or the minority of users who disclose their this kind of sensitive information. Not everyone, but some people may be fine with disclosing that information, and that's going to be used in the training data to make inferences about where Alice is based on the comparison, what other people liked or shared, and so on. And that's of course quite frightening, because there's work that's also already 10 years old here from Kosinski and colleagues, how they found, just based on Facebook likes and shares, I think only likes, yeah, from 58,000 volunteers from Facebook, they predicted private traits and attitudes only on the basis of these kind of likes. And it's frightening how accurate they were, and it's frightening what the kinds of features they predicted. If you look on the orange column, the predicted variables were age, gender, political and religious views, relationship status, proxy for sexual orientation, social network size, but also ethnicity, intelligence, satisfaction with life, substance use, you know, drugs, are the parents divorced or not? So quite personal stuff. And here is the accuracy for the certain kind of factors that they predicted, and you see like whether there is a Caucasian or African American, it's 0.95. Christianity, Democrat, gay, lesbian, gender, and so on. So it's quite personal data that you can just get from only 58,000 users based on their likes. Imagine if you consider all the other data that are available then and combine them, how much you can predict and then use. And there was that was really some case. There's an article here from 2012 in the New York Times by Charles Duhigg that also turned into, that was an excerpt from his book, The Power of Habit, then, where he investigated especially the US company Target, a supermarket company, who predicted whether female customers were pregnant. And they used, of course, machine learning techniques there, and he sort of exposed that in this article, and it had a lot of uproar, of course. So here the case was that for Target, and you also may all use that. Sometimes you have these loyalty cards, right? You collect bonus, but every purchase you get some points, and then at the end of the half year you get like 2 cents discount or some ridiculous amount. I never get these collect these cards because it's just so many cards everywhere. Like, you know, I don't want them. But of course, the point is that they collect what you in data about what you buy. So they get a profile. You get a in the case of Target, they gave you a guest ID number. They ask for some personal information about birth date, gender, name, location. Typical what you always voluntarily give, yeah. And then you have a profile there. And then you can follow the consumer behavior. And also they have a baby shower registry for women who gave birth. And they also voluntarily, for this, they get some kind of discount or party or whatever. I don't know what the baby shower was for, but you can register there when you're pregnant. And some subset of women also, of course, registered there. And they gave their due date. And then, of course, you can follow their pattern of consummation behavior. So in the course of pregnancy, you buy different products and so on, and you collect and you collect and you collect. And then they fed their machine learning. And when a woman started to buy a certain collection of products, well, she's very likely to be pregnant because she's buying that. And other pregnant people who have been pregnant have been buying this, or have been exhibiting this kind of shopping behavior in the past. And then you can sort of send them appropriate material, you know, advertising material. You can offer discount cards. You want them and the new customers that are not yet born also want to be loyal to you and want to keep them in the shop and want to make sure that they can shop everything in your shop. You know, they don't have to buy this stuff at a different grocery store or something like that, or department store. So you offer discounts, you send out coffee coupons and so on. That's all not very hurtful for the company, but it keeps the customers coming. And when you are sent this material, even maybe before you have told your partner that you're pregnant, so that's maybe frightening. And so when this article came out, it was kind of an uproar that this is happening and what they all collect, and they have access to all kinds of information. And as I found this morning, so in Finland, you have to get these 3 cards to get discounts or something like that. There was an ad. I don't know if you recognize the cards, but I don't know if they're any significant. The payback thing is that our system in Germany, when there are certain companies like Shell and pharmacies are sort of connected, and you can get bonuses or something like that. But I'm not sure whether this is still accurate. Anyway, more examples. So there was an article here, and the headline says it all: Inside Facebook's suicide algorithm. Here's how the company uses artificial intelligence to predict your mental state from your posts. Is anyone likely to commit suicide? They're going to use that for everything. And just recently, on January 2nd, and I got this from Carissa, because she's every day looking for this kind of stuff and sharing it on social media to alert the public. So Facebook has now installed a new way to track the websites you visit, link history. And I think I've been asked to acknowledge something. Don't you want to collect your links? So it's a new feature that is automatically activated, and you have to take action as a user to deactivate it. So what they do is they sell it to you. Oh God, all the links that you clicked on will be in one repository so that you never forget them. Why would I remember them? You know, I click on stuff and then it doesn't matter, you know. And it may not be important for me anymore, but they sell it to you as if you wanted to have a repository for all your links. And then they collect them. Of course, they collect them for themselves to have access to your link history, right? So, and you have to deactivate that feature. Otherwise, they collect this kind of data to, of course, enhance personalized advertising. So they have everything in place that you click on. And of course, then you make a profile, you know, gay or hetero, whatever, all kinds of features that can be highlighted there and useful for them. So that's quite recent. I don't know if you're on Facebook and check it out. So let's go back to human mind reading. Remember, I suggested there's some kind of maybe statistical reasoning going on in the brain based on a rich body of information. That's what it would look like for the human case. And the analogous case for deep mind reading is, of course, then there's a rich body of information, the personal user data, that are analyzed by predictive analytics or machine learning models to make predictions and take appropriate action. So there's a strong analogy here between the kind of human mind reading that we engage in and the and deep mind reading. It's just that the mind reader is not an individual, it's just a big company or a set of companies that can then use it and take action. So if you remember the intentional stance by Dennett, there it's also about a very general prediction or explanation strategy that we use in order to make sense of other people's behavior, rather than trying to use physics and laws of physics and so on, or design and computer programs. And the part of the theory is that, it doesn't really matter whether you get it completely right, that the person X has belief about Y and the desire for Q. But if a certain range or a certain abstract content that you ascribe to a certain individual X, if that leads you to make the right kind of prediction, that's successful enough. It's a pragmatic stance. You don't need to get it completely right. And maybe there's no fact of the matter what a person really exactly believes. It's the same here. It's not a kind of mind reading where the company guesses exactly, oh yeah, Peter believes that snow is white. No, they're just going to make predictions based on a rough, ready correlation of data or a pattern that they identify. And as long as the prediction and the action that you take are successful, that's sufficient. You don't have to be more accurate or determinate about contents of beliefs, right? That's not what matters here. Anyway. Yeah, I already mentioned the Cambridge Analytica case, where, of course, this is used to mind shape enormously and then have devastating consequences for people in Britain with the Brexit campaign and misinformation campaign. Here's Eric Siegel again. So why is this important? Compelled to grow and propel to the mainstream, predictive technology is commonplace and affects everyone, every day. It impacts your experiences in undetectable ways as you drive, shop, study, vote, see the doctor, communicate, watch TV, earn, borrow, or even steal. And my claim is that it's similar enough to human mind reading to be considered as a form of mind reading. It's also different enough from human mind reading to be considered a unique form of mind reading, deep mind reading, because of course no human being can churn to this amount of data. We don't have the means to do that. It's just the machine can do that. And it's powerful enough for us to be worried about it concerning our privacy and to call for further regulation in this area. We are not approaching an hour. I would have more about mind shaping, or like at least about content moderation, which is a feature here in social media sites. But I want to skip that little story and then end with a quote from Carissa's book to direct you to mind shape you to read it. So she's really on a mission, and that's, I think, important in this area, to follow and to alert the public what's done with your data. So that's the first sentences of her book. So governments and hundreds of corporations are spying on you and me and everyone we know, every minute of every day. They track and record all they can, our location, our communications, our internet searches, our biometric information, social relations, purchases, and much more. They want to know who we are, what we think, where we hurt. They want to predict and influence our behavior. They have too much power, and their power stems from us, from you, from your data. It's time to take back control. Reclaiming privacy is the only way we can regain control of our lives and our societies. And with that, I think, of course, no. we want more clemency, but we also want more legislative regulation there because it's a free market still. So thank you very much, and thanks to Carissa, who's not here, for inspiration.
Thank you very much. And we have plenty of time for discussion. So let's see.